Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar on making protein claims with confidence. My name is Rachel. I'm the regulatory lead at Food Label Maker, and I'll be guiding you through today's session. I will also be joined by my co-host, Treen, who is also our nutrition expert, alongside the rest of our team. Over the next 30 minutes, we will cover everything you need to know about making accurate protein claims, understanding and calculating PDCAAS, and staying FDA compliant. Okay, so you may wonder, why is this important? Well, protein claims are a big deal. Mistakes can lead to compliance risk, consumer misinformation, and even recalls. But rest assured, as today will give you the tools to make protein claims with confidence and accuracy. Before we proceed, I would like to know what method to use to calculate PDCAAS. Let me know, please, by answering the poll below. So please let me know what method you currently use. Do you do manual calculations, maybe lab testing, or even a third party? Interesting results. It seems that many of you do manual calculations, and some of you are still exploring the method. Okay, well, today we will learn how to calculate the PDCAAS manually. In addition, we will cover why protein labeling matters for your product. We'll go over how you can be making valid, good source, and high protein claims. We will also cover the FDA rules and PDCAAS basics for accurate claims, in addition to a guided step-by-step tutorial on the PDCAAS calculation, as well as some common pitfalls you might experience with protein claims and some practical tips to overcome them. Last but not least, we will cover how you can be using the Food Label Maker software to perform the necessary corrections by PDCAAS, and we'll have a Q&A session to answer any questions you might have. All right, so let's start with the basics. Why does protein matter? Well, protein is a key nutrient that consumers pay attention to. Trends like high-protein snacks, plant-based products, and sports nutrition make protein a spotlight nutrient. When labeled correctly, protein can enhance perceived product value and support marketing claims. But labeling it incorrectly can backfire, which is why FDA compliance is super important. With that said, let's start by talking about protein labeling and the regulations set by the FDA. Understanding this is critical for anyone making protein claims on their product. So the FDA allows you to make a protein claim on your product label only if the product contributes a meaningful amount of protein to the diet. Simply put, you cannot just label something as a good source of protein unless it provides a significant amount per serving and meets certain thresholds set by the FDA. Protein claims are regulated through a combination of codified regulations, which define both the thresholds and the quality correction that must take place first. So, to claim good source of protein, your product must contain 10 to 19% of the daily value for protein per serving. And to claim higher excellent source of protein, your product must provide 20% or more of the daily value per serving. And to determine whether your product meets that good source or high in protein threshold, you must correct the protein grams by the Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score, or PDCAAS. One important distinction here is between grams of protein and the percentage daily value on a label. The percentage daily value is based on a reference intake, currently 50 grams of protein per day for adults, and it's used to help consumers understand how much a serving contributes to their daily protein needs. The number of grams you see on the label represents the total protein by weight in a serving. It doesn't tell you anything about the quality of that protein, meaning how well your body can use it. So with that said, PDCAAS does not change the grams of protein shown on the label. Instead, it adjusts the percentage daily value to better reflect true protein quality. For example, a beans-based product might have 10 grams of protein per serving, which is equal to 20% of the daily value of protein. But without PDCAAS correction, that value could be overstated. As you can see, the adjusted protein percentage daily value is 16 after PDCAAS correction. So not correcting your percentage daily value for protein through PDCAAS can overstate the percentage daily value for this product serving. Okay, so this takes us to the next topic, which is why corrected protein values are required on labels using PDCAAS. So here is where it gets more technical. Not all protein is created equal. The FDA requires that protein content reflect both the quantity and quality of the protein. This is measured using the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, or PDCAAS. So what is PDCAAS, you may ask? Well, PDCAAS is a value between 0 and 1, determined in the lab or calculated, and it's used to guide protein labeling for both children and adult labels. It adjusts the protein value based on digestibility and the amino acid profile of a product, ensuring that the protein you're claiming actually contributes usable amino acids to the diet. Thus, this prevents misleading claims like a product appearing high in protein, but actually lacking the essential amino acids. To understand PDCAAS more, we first need to talk about essential amino acids. From food. A high-quality protein, like milk for example, contains all essential amino acids in sufficient amounts. If one of those amino acids is missing or too low, it becomes what's called the limiting amino acid, because it does limit the body's ability to make new protein, no matter how much total protein is consumed. All right, so now that we've got some definitions out of the way, you will basically need two elements to calculate PDCAAS. First, you will need the amino acid profile for your product. It allows you to check if the protein in your product contains all the essential amino acids that we need. Next, you will need the digestibility score of your product, which can be calculated or obtained from published scientific data from WHO or FAO, for example, or even laboratory testing. And this digestibility score indicates how easily the protein can be broken down and absorbed by our body. By the way, we will provide you with the resources mentioned in the upcoming slide. All right, so now we come to the technical part. And calculating the PDCAAS can be fun if you get the pieces of the puzzle together. Okay, so to do this, we will refer to some reports in Food Label Maker available for our advanced plan. So basically, to calculate PDCAAS, you have to obtain the amino acid data of your product along with the amino acid score. You will also need the percent protein for each ingredient, in addition to the protein digestibility factors of each ingredient and the recipe protein digestibility score. All right, so PDCAAS elements are aligned. Let's move on to the formula. When it comes to the PDCAAS formula, PDCAAS is equal to the amino acid score multiplied by the recipe protein digestibility. This is the calculation you use for determining PDCAAS for mixed foods. So because we're talking about combination foods, regarding the recipe protein digestibility, you will have to take the percent that each ingredient contributes to the total protein in your recipe and multiply that by the respective ingredient's protein digestibility factor. This gives you a weight protein digestibility value. All right, so the formula is clear. Let's get started with the steps. So step number 1 is to obtain the amino acid profile per gram of protein for your product and identify the limiting amino acid. To do this, you can simply use the amino acid profile report offered by the Food Label Maker, granted that all the ingredients added into the recipe include their amino acid profile. You can see in the report here, my recipe's limiting amino acid score is 0.85. Okay, moving on to step number 2. For calculating the recipe protein digestibility, we need to determine which ingredient contributes to the total protein and in what percent. Using Food Label Maker's nutrient report, we can determine the percent that each ingredient contributes to the total protein. In my recipe, oats and egg whites contribute to the protein content, and you can see the percentage contribution of each ingredient here. So it's around 76% for oats and around 24% for egg whites. All right, so moving on to step number 3. Okay, so step number 3 is to obtain the general protein digestibility factors for each ingredient that contributes protein to the recipe. This can be obtained either from reputable sources and specific research articles, such as those offered by FAO and WHO, or you can just find them from, get them from your ingredient supplier. So as you can see over here, we do have different digestibility factors offered by FAO and WHO. So as you can see, we do have different digestibility factors for different ingredients. All right, so remember that part of the equation of calculating PDCAAS. We have to determine the protein digestibility digestibility for our recipe. So I'm showing you the recipe protein digestibility formula again. And using the percent of protein and the protein digestibility factor of each ingredient, we can determine the weighed recipe protein digestibility. Again, we identify the percent that each ingredient contributes to protein from the ingredient contribution report in Food Label Maker, and we multiply that by the percent by which the ingredient, and we multiply that percent by the ingredient digestibility factor that we have obtained from a reliable source like the FAO or WHO list I showed earlier. Lastly, we add each of the products together to come up with the recipe protein digestibility. So let's do the math together. As I said, to come up with the recipe protein digestibility, you have to multiply the percent protein of each ingredient by its respective digestibility factor. So I've done this for both ingredients over here, as you can see, and I've gone ahead and added them together to obtain my weighed recipe protein digestibility value, which is 0.77 in my case. Okay, so now that we have collected all our formula components, let's go ahead and calculate the score together. As a reminder, PDCAAS is equal to the limiting amino acid score multiplied by the weighed recipe protein digestibility. The limiting amino acid score is equal to 0.85 from lysine. If you recall earlier, this was obtained from the amino acid report in Food Label Maker. And we went ahead and multiplied it by the recipe protein digestibility, which is the value we calculated earlier together. As you can see, the PDCAAS value is equal to 0.66, which aligns with the PDCAAS value range, which is usually between 0 and 1. All right, so now that we've calculated the PDCAAS value, let's go ahead and input this value into the Food Label Maker software. Once you input your PDCAAS value into Food Label Maker, the software will automatically correct your nutrition label and adjust the percentage daily value for the protein within your serving. So let me go ahead and show you how this would look like. So as you can see here, this is my nutrition facts label before adjusting the percentage daily value to PDCAAS. So one serving included 15 grams of protein, and the percentage daily value was around 30%. However, after PDCAAS correction, the percentage daily value now displays 20%. So PDCAAS adjusts for how well the body can digest and utilize the protein, and it ensures that the percentage daily value within the label reflects true nutritional quality, not just raw protein quantity. All right. So let's see if you recall the different thresholds we went over regarding protein claims. So our corrected label indicated a 20% protein daily value, Which claim can we use in that case? Can we add a good source of protein claim or a high or excellent source of protein claim? Let me know by answering the poll below. All right. As a refresher, the FDA thresholds for a good source of protein claim are 10 to 19% of the daily value per serving. However, if you have a percentage daily value greater than or equal to 20, you can go ahead and add in a higher excellent source of protein claim. Okay, good job, everyone.
Pitfalls you might be experiencing when creating protein claims, and some of them are usually using outdated amino acid references or digestibility factors, in addition to skipping on the PDCAAS calculation for multi-ingredient blends. So if you recall, you have to account for every ingredient that contributes to the protein content within your recipe in order to calculate the weighed recipe digestibility value. So this is something you should avoid skipping on. I would also advise to avoid using outdated data and ignoring the limiting amino acid value. So if you remember the PDCAAS formula, the limiting amino acid value is the value that's going to be used within the calculation. So always make sure that you're referring to the correct limiting amino acid score. Okay. Again, some practical tips to avoid the common pitfalls are to always use up-to-date data. For example, you can refer to the USDA reference data or the FAO and WHO digestibility factors list. You can also calculate, you should also calculate the weighed protein digestibility factor for the entire recipe if you have a multi-ingredient recipe. And lastly, I would suggest you always check with your supplier's certificate of analysis regarding any amino acid profile information or digestibility factors. Okay, so these are some tips to avoid some calculation mistakes for PDCAAS. All right, so this brings us to the end of today's session. I hope you found this session insightful. I know PDCAAS calculation can be tricky, but with the help of the different reports in Food Label Maker and the steps mentioned today, it should become a bit more easier and intuitive to do. So if you would like to schedule a more in-depth one-on-one session, feel free to scan this QR code and you can arrange for a call and walk through the different reports you have in Food Label Maker and discuss any protein claim related questions you might have. In addition, our nutritionist team has over 25 years of experience in food labeling and compliance across different markets. So if you would like us to handle your label creation for you, feel free to let us know. We can also handle calculating PDCAAS for you. Actually, if you would like some help in PDCAAS calculation, please make sure to answer the poll below so we can reach out directly to you, right? And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the question box below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.